Amendment 3 has created a lot of buzz here in the state of Florida, and it's crucial that voters understand the real impact of what it'll do here in our state. Now, here at My Florida Green, we believe in having a healthy discourse when it comes to controversial topics, especially ones like Amendment 3. So in an effort to create a fair and balanced conversation about Amendment 3, on October 23rd, we invited the Policy Director of Smart and Safe, Jake Hoffman, the committee behind Amendment 3, to join us in a live stream discussion. Now, rather than having a debate, we engaged in a discussion to help educate voters and ultimately allow you to decide. In this clip from our discussion, we explore how Amendment 3 could impact patients in the medical program. How will the recreational legalization affect patients who rely on the state's medical program?
So as of now, the medical program does not have any new changes based on this amendment, right? So I don't know. And this is going to be the answer you're going to hear a lot through this conversation is once this constitutional amendment is passed, because I do think it's going to pass, once it is passed in 10 days or so now, the legislature is going to be able to create a framework. And it's actually in the amendment, right? You have 6 months to create a framework afterwards. And so they're going to go into legislative session in January. And then between January and, April, May of next year, you're going to see a lot of people, maybe your group and many other groups from around the state. They're all going to come up there and they're all going to lobby for different things. You've got the medical side of things. You've got the corporate side of things. You've got the activists. You have other corporations, other, small bit. You're going to have everybody come up there advocating for different things in this framework. And so, we can go into the details of how that works. But a lot of people don't realize that that's the process. That is the legislative process. And so, when you ask, like, how is it going to affect the patients and the medical community that's using it right now, the answer is, as the amendment does not change that. What's going to possibly change that is what the legislature does with this when they go to implement the framework. So I have no extra knowledge about this, but like if I had to guess, because I've seen it in other states and everything, you might see that medical patients have a different level of THC or a different level of the amount that they can purchase per month versus what the what somebody recreationally can do. That might be something that's a difference. That's kind of very simple to comprehend. But as far as medical patients go, like there's not a massive difference in what's going to be happening to them. Like they're still not going to have like the sales tax and some of those other things that they get the benefits of through the process they have now.
Okay. Well, I think that's kind of where my sticking point is because nothing does change. And here's what I mean. What I see happening is very likely product shortages, a huge increase in prices because of the higher demand from recreational users. And here's what I mean. What doesn't change, what Amendment 3 doesn't change is vertical integration. I know that's a big word for a lot of people. A lot of people don't understand what vertical integration is. I just want to do a quick summary. So essentially what that means is every dispensary has to operate under a grow license, right? And they also have to own the packaging and processing facility, and then they have to own the dispensaries, right? All have to be vertically integrated, which is, it's about a $50+ million endeavor just to even get started, not to mention all the other costs to get started. So what that does, and currently in the state of Florida, right now we have about something like 22 grow licenses allowed in operation.
Right now,
25.
And 22 in waiting, yeah.
Yeah, so 25, and there's 22 that's been pending for quite some time now. So the 25 grow licenses, right? And right now, if you look at the medical program, which we're very connected to, there's about 900,000 patients in the program roughly. And that's what these licenses are barely keeping up with. And I say barely because there's a lot of patients who can't get strains and products that they really need for their condition that is really helping their condition, but it's not always there, right? So
let me ask, why do you, I haven't heard that so far. So I'm curious, why do you think that is that they don't have the ability to get the amount of product that they need?
That's great. I see patients every day, literally every single day. We have over 43,000 on our platform. So let me just kind of finish my point here. So again, we have the data set there. We have over 43,000 patients. So, and I constantly get that.
What your opinion was on why you're not able to now.
So, and that's the thing. So as of right now, they're barely keeping up because I know that there's patients and I'm a patient myself. I'll go to try to get a certain strain, a certain, product that I know really works for me. And it's not always there. So they're barely keeping up with that, right? And that's why there's all those other licenses on the governor's desk right now, but they haven't been released. And that's the concern, because if those licenses are not released, here's what happens. We have a supply chain that's barely kept up with with less than 1 million people. And if you look at the stats, there's about 18 million people over the age of 21 in the state of Florida, not to mention all of our tourism that comes down here. So potentially that supply chain is going to have to keep up with 20 plus million people or more, maybe a little less, maybe 10 million people. But going from 1 million, less than 1 million, to over 10 plus million people, what it's going to create.
What do you think this?
Let me finish my point. So what it's going to create is a supply chain implosion, right? Because what's going to happen is patients won't be able to get products, which is criminal in my opinion. And recreational users won't be able to get products as frequently. And if you look at other places, right, that have vertical integration, right? So one of them, if you just look to Ohio, they have a limited vertical integration. So their vertical integration is less strict than ours, okay? And in Ohio, I've been in contact with people in Ohio, and I can tell you, they're struggling to get, and they just passed recreational under this limited vertical integration model. They're struggling to get quality products. Prices have skyrocketed right away. Because the demand went up so high. And when you have a vertical integration model, that's what happens. And if you look in the past to California, the same thing happened to California in their program. The program's still a mess. So how do we make sure that patients are taken care of in this process?
Well, that was my question to you, because I'm curious, as somebody who sees patients all the time, and you're saying that you have shortages now. My question is, what do you think should happen in to create it so that there's actually enough supply in the state of Florida? What would the solution be in your
Fantastic. That's a great question. One, we all need to vote this amendment down, and we need to create a separate bill that separates recreational from medical, and create a separate infrastructure that would allow for smaller cultivators to enter the market. Because the reality is typically it's the smaller cultivators, the smaller, more boutique cultivators that have better product.
So that's not something that the amendment has an effect on, to be honest, because that framework that you're talking about, separating both medical and recreational, being able to expand licenses, to be able to give licenses to small growers and things like that, that's not anything that's mentioned in the amendment. So this is one of my main arguments for the amendment, for people who support legalization in some capacity. And I know that we're going to have a very nuanced conversation for the rest of this time about the people who are in the industry and have differing opinions on how it should be done. But getting this onto the legislature's desk, forcing them to address legalization recreationally, is going to cause this framework to actually happen. The medical program's been around now for almost 8 years or so. And you have not seen any bills come anywhere close to passing, whether it's recreational, expansion of licenses, all these different things. All of these pieces of it are not going to happen. And so that's a lot of, being our policy director and just somebody being very involved in the political process here in the state of Florida. You are not going to get like a homegrown bill next year if this fails. You're not going to get the legislature's not going to come out with a bill that legalizes marijuana in any of the ways that you want it to be if this amendment does not force it upon their desk, is my main point. So I know that there's reservations about some of the language that's being used, about what's going to happen, how the implementation works. But the reality is it will not get addressed in the state of Florida for many years to come, unless it is done by constitutional amendment.
Well, it hasn't been addressed under the constitutional amendment currently in place for medical patients. So I don't see that ever changing. Here's the thing. Here's the reality: is all those licenses that have been on the governor's desk, they've been in there for quite some time.
I agree.
And that has not been released under the medical program. It certainly is not going to be. They're certainly not going, because and DeSantis has not been quiet about this. We know that he's not necessarily a proponent of recreational marijuana. So it's not like he's going to just go and approve those right away. I don't think he's going to approve it.
It's a very interesting point you make, because one of the main talking points of this entire campaign, and I see it in the comments now, is that this is a monopoly, right? And so if you have all these licenses, you have all these people who want to get in on the game, and they're complaining about it being a monopoly. And like, people don't know my history, right? Like, I went up there in 2018 and I said, why would you give out 6 licenses? Right. That was me to Republican legislators being like, why would you only give out this many licenses? Like, you totally screwed up the medical program. This was back in 2018, a long time ago. And obviously not a whole lot has changed. And so my point being that, like, if you have they're saying two things, right? Like, this is a monopoly and we're upset about the monopoly, even though, again, 20, 25 companies is not a monopoly, just by definition. Even if there were three, it's still not by definition. So it's either a monopoly or we need more licenses, but they're holding all the licenses. So like you have both of these things going on there. And so I agree with you that this is something that needs to be addressed. And if it were up to me, it's not up to me. I'm just a guy who advocates for a bunch of stuff in Tallahassee. I'm not in a state house right now. So look, I would love to see them add additional licenses for medical program, recreational.
And you're right. It's not a monopoly. It's called an oligopoly, actually, is what it actually is. And the thing is, with vertical integration being the way that it's worded in the amendment currently, it's not changing. It does not allow for small cultivators to enter the market, because you can't get a loan to start this, to enter this business. It's federally illegal. And I don't know any small businesses that can come up with just $50 million lickety split.
I agree. It's
that's just not going to happen. And the thing is this being a permanent change, it's never going to change. That will never go away. If you want to see the entire live stream discussion, unscripted and unedited, go to our YouTube channel, or you can go to our Facebook page for My Flow to Green, or you can get the audio versions on Spotify and Apple Podcast. Feel free to check us out. Get educated before you vote.